Hi there, it's Jo from Minerva. Today I'd like to do something a little bit different, which is to share and pool our ideas. I'd like to know how you store your patterns and your projects. After watching the video today, it would be great if you could share your ideas below in the comments section of how you store your patterns and how you store your craft supplies. I'm going to show you a few ways in which I store mine. Obviously I've got a really big space, I'm really lucky. Some people who have smaller spaces might have some different ideas of how to keep their stuff really organised, clean and tidy. I try to keep my fabric stash at a minimum. I prefer to be wearing my fabrics that I choose rather than storing them up somewhere. So I don't have so much fabric to store, but I do have a lot of patterns that I store. And first of all, I'd like to show you how I look after those. I sort my patterns into different categories. So these are my big four patterns. So these are the patterns from major pattern companies, New Look, McCall's, Simplicity, the ones that are in an envelope, and they're all the same size, and they're got a tissue paper piece inside. And I keep all those stood up in a box. And that way I can look through them, a bit like if you've got them in a drawer, but I can see them all without having to get everything out to have a look what there is. Next up, I have a box of vintage patterns, and I keep all of my vintage patterns inside a plastic bag. So this stops me dog-earing them when I'm looking through them, because the paper's sometimes a little bit more delicate. So all of those are in here. I keep those sideways because that fits them on the shelf that they're on, but also it stops the light getting to any of the images, because if I stored them halfway up, then this top bit might get faded and the bottom bit wouldn't. If I make a vintage pattern, so say for example this one, then I put the pattern pieces just loose in the back, because I don't want to keep trying to squeeze them back into the packet, because the more I try and put them back into the paper envelope, the more I'm going to rip the corners here and bust the bottom out of the packet. So now that I've used that one and I've taken the pieces out, I keep the pieces in the bag with the cover, but everything's much easier to get to. So that's how I store my vintage patterns. Indie patterns are sometimes a little bit more tricky to store because they're different sized envelopes. So some are quite wide, some are smaller, some are in a thick card envelope. So these ones I keep in a box just like my big four patterns, but I'm keeping those standing up, because then again I can pull them out and find them easily. But I don't tend to put these ones in a plastic bag, because indie patterns tend to be in a firmer card envelope. So these are my indie patterns. Sometimes I might use a pattern from a magazine, or I might download a PDF and cut it out of printing paper, and then you've got quite a bit more of a bulk of paper to try and store. So I keep those in the same size boxes, but I stand them up and keep them in a plastic packet. So in here are ones that I have cut out, and inside are all of the PDF pieces, which are a little bit bigger. I also use these plastic envelopes to store a pattern that when I cut it out, it's quite big. So this is the Elodie wrap dress, and I've made it a couple of times, but I don't want to keep trying to jam all that tissue back into the packet. So in here I've got the pattern and the paper pieces, and they're next to each other so that I can keep it nice and slim, but I haven't had to keep trying to put those big front wrap pieces back inside the packet. The same goes for a pattern that's got lots of views. So this is a children's pattern. This is Simplicity 1566, and when you've opened the tissue pieces, it starts to sort of grow, and I've cut all the pieces out that I've used, and I've made all of the views off there. So I've got a lot of paper pieces, and they're all small and fiddly. So I keep those in one of these plastic packets, but with the cover showing. What's also good in here is you could put a note. So in here it says, reduce the back to size 12, toile again, not sure about the waistband. So on this one, I haven't made a successful make of the Pietra pants yet. I've put it aside, but I've put myself a note inside the packet. To store my projects, I use organza bags. So these are a thin organza bag that I can see through so that I can see what's in the packet, and they're not too slippy. If you store your projects and all of the supplies for projects in plastic bags, and when you put them on a shelf they all sort of slip against each other. So I use organza bags. These are also good because you could hang them up in your wardrobe if you haven't got much sewing storage space, so you can just hang those up on a coat hanger and they can hang in the wardrobe. So in the bag I put the pattern that I'm working on. So this one is Birders 7062. I've done quite a bit of fitting and adjusting these patterns, so I can't quite fit them back in the envelope yet. And then inside the bag I've got the zip ready, and I've got all of the pieces cut out ready. Actually, I've also interfaced the waistband, which I didn't even remember doing. So there we are. It's a good way of keeping everything together that you've done or that you've bought or that you've collected and curated, ready to finish a project. I like to leave a spare piece of the fabric in there so that I can use it under the machine to test my first bit of sewing on that different type of fabric. So I've got a little test piece of fabric in there, and now that is ready to sew. I have these organza bags and I cut out lots and lots of different things. If you live in a home where there's a busy kitchen table and it's hardly ever free, then I like to boycott the table and keep it for myself. As soon as it's clear, I might cut out 3 or 4 things and then bag them up into these organza bags. And then when I've got a sew day, I can pick a bag and choose a project. This one's ready to go. This one is one that isn't quite ready to go. So in here, I have chosen this needle cord and I'm going to make a shirt from the shirt dress pattern, but I'm a little way off this one yet. I need to find some buttons for it. I don't have matching thread for that one yet. But as I buy the things that I need to complete the project, I'll drop them into the bag, because if you ever bought the most beautiful buttons and then you can't find them, I have. And so that's when I started putting all of my project pieces into an organza bag. That's how I store my projects and patterns, but I would love to know how you store yours, because you always learn something new and there's always a genius idea out there. So do share your storage ideas in the comments section below. Head over to Minerva to take a look at our patterns, fabrics and promotions and offers. You can also make an account with us, and your free account will mean that you can upload and share your makes with the sewing community at Minerva. Thanks very much for watching. See you very soon.